Hamilton's economic plan was not widely accepted by everyone. He had a lot of opposition from many different groups of people. Um, with the idea of the bonds, people bought the bonds during the war, knowing that they would then be able to cash them in and get more money for them. But after a while, when the country was in debt and couldn't pay back their debt, a lot of people grew frustrated and wanted their money now. So a lot of people started to sell their bonds to other people, known as speculators, who would then buy the bonds at a lower price, but the people would get their cash. Now these speculators would be able to get a profit because now they hold these bonds and they'll be able to cash them in for more than what they paid for it. So it's going to be a profit. For a lot of people, that was a problem. They thought it wasn't fair. For Hamilton, it wasn't a problem. He thought, well, the speculators are going to get a profit. Oh, well, they also took a risk in buying back these bonds at a lower price, maybe, but they didn't know if they were ever going to get paid back. So the speculators also took their own risk. So it was not a big deal for Hamilton, but other people saw it as a problem. Jefferson was one of these people who thought that speculators should not be able to make a profit out of this because it wasn't fair. The southern states also opposed Hamilton's plan because overall the southern states didn't have a huge debt from the war. They had been able to pay back what they owed. And so the north is really where most of the debt was concentrated. If the government ended up paying back and taking on all of the debt, including the state's debts, then all of the money generated by the country through taxes and things like that would then go to pay off the debt that was mostly in the North. So the South thought that why would they have to take on and pay for the North's debt when their own debt was done? They also weren't that big a fan of the taxes because most of the taxes had to deal with manufactured goods, and that really didn't benefit the economy of the South. The economy of the South was mostly agricultural, so it really didn't concern the South that much about these tariffs and these taxes that all relied on manufactured goods, which was mostly concentrated in the North as well. And some groups of people argued that Congress really didn't have the authority to create things like a national bank and a national mint that Hamilton wanted to do. Some of the actions that Hamilton wanted to do were not specifically enumerated in the Constitution. And so some people thought that through Hamilton's plan, the government would be overstepping their boundaries as to what they were able to do. So figures like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison were definitely big oppositions to Hamilton, especially when it came to the idea of interpreting the Constitution. So that brings us to the idea of the necessary and proper clause, right? Or what's known as the elastic clause. And that's what Hamilton used as his reasoning to being able to create a bank and being able to create a national mint. It was this necessary and proper clause which allowed the Congress to create these things to be able to carry out their already enumerated duties. So for Hamilton, he held what's known as a loose construction of the Constitution, where Congress can do what is necessary to carry out its powers. That's where the elastic clause comes in. Hamilton was definitely a big supporter of that. Jefferson and Madison were more strict constructionist views of the Constitution, where they really settled on what was specifically enumerated on the Constitution. That's what Congress can do. Right? The necessary and proper clause is only there for emergencies, but the government can really only follow what is specifically stated in the Constitution. So these two views of the Constitution and how they interpret it, Hamilton and Jefferson were definitely big leaders on these two views, and eventually groups of people are going to fall into one of these two ideas of how to interpret the Constitution. Initially, they were going to be known as Hamiltonians or Jeffersonians. And really, we can see here what's going to become the initial start or foundation of what becomes political parties in our country, right? We still don't have any political parties. And here, for the first time, we're starting to see the development of two very different ideas of thought when it comes to government and how government should run. Hamilton and those who kind of fed into Hamilton's idea of government and how it should work really believed in a strong central government. Hamilton always believed that the national government should definitely be sovereign and strong in comparison to the state governments. Jeffersonians, on the other hand, they were all about states' power, right? And they wanted to keep the power as close to the people as possible. Hamiltonians wanted a balance of power between the mass of people and wealthier citizens. Hamiltonians definitely didn't think that the people of the United States, all of the people of the United States, were really equipped to be able to make decisions for the country. They thought there needed to be a balance between the large mass of people who just sometimes acted as a mob and may not have been completely educated on the subject, as opposed to those citizens who were more educated that definitely should take a more of a leadership role in steering the country. Jefferson, on the other hand, believed in the right of the people. He believed in the right of all of the people to rule the country. Hamiltonians also wanted to promote manufacturing and business. Hamilton was always for manufacturing and business. That's why a lot of people in the North liked Hamilton and were Hamiltonians. He was all about business and manufacturing. Jefferson was always more about the supporter of agriculture and farming. In fact, for Jefferson, his ideal society and ideal country was one that was based on agriculture. Also, Hamiltonians were all about tariffs on foreign goods. They wanted to protect American manufacturers. They wanted to tax foreign products to make sure that American manufacturers would be able to make a profit and they would be able to get the best out of business. Jefferson, on the other hand, wanted to keep taxes low to keep the costs low for the goods that farmers had to buy. Right? And so here we begin to see this very distinct difference between Hamiltonians and Jeffersonians, which eventually is going to lead us into the development of our first political parties.